When I was little, I used to believe my family was unbreakable. We were like every other family on our quiet suburban street, birthday parties in the backyard, summer barbecues, and holiday mornings filled with laughter and wrapping paper scattered everywhere. But what I didn't know then was how fragile those bonds could be. I was 10 when everything changed, when my dad walked out, and the weight of his decisions fell squarely on my mom's shoulders and on my heart. The years after he left were a blur of survival. Mom picked up extra shifts, working double to keep us afloat, while I grew up faster than I should have. By high school, I was more of her partner than her daughter, helping her with bills, meals, and keeping things together at home. Dad was nothing more than an occasional postcard or phone call that felt empty and forced. I told myself I didn't need him, that I was stronger without him, but somewhere inside, there was still that little girl who wanted him to care enough to stay. It was early spring when Mom sat me down at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly, like she was bracing herself. The sunlight spilled across the table, but her expression was shadowed with worry. "Emily," she began softly, "your father called me. He wants to come back." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. My heart pounded as I searched her face for a hint of a joke, but she was serious. I wanted to scream, to tell her that this was madness, that we had already survived his absence and didn't need to open the door to the past. But Mom looked at me with those eyes that had carried years of exhaustion, and I realized she wasn't just talking about him, she was talking about herself. She wanted to believe people could change. She wanted to believe he could still be the man she once loved. The day he arrived, I stood by the window upstairs, peeking through the curtains as a cab pulled up. He stepped out slowly, older, worn, carrying a suitcase that looked as tired as he did. He hesitated at the front door, hand hovering over the bell, like even he wasn't sure if he belonged there anymore. Mom opened the door, and I heard the faint sound of her voice, warm but cautious. When he stepped inside, I felt the air in the house shift, like the past had been dragged back in with him. Dinner that night was unbearable. Mom had cooked her best, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits, but the food sat untouched as silence filled the room. Dad tried small talk, asking about school, about my plans after graduation, but his voice sounded rehearsed, like he was reading lines from a script. I gave him one-word answers, my fork clinking against my plate louder than his attempts at conversation. Mom tried to hold it together, smiling faintly, but the weight of what wasn't being said was suffocating. Later that night, I found myself clutching an old photo in my room, the one where we were all smiling in the backyard, before everything fell apart. My chest ached as I wondered how Mom could so easily let him back after everything. Didn't she remember the nights she cried herself to sleep? Didn't she remember how he had chosen himself over us? The next morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand, staring out the window like he was searching for something that wasn't there. I wanted to walk past him, but he said my name quietly, almost pleading. "Emily, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make things right." His words made me freeze. I turned to him, my voice shaking. "Do you even understand what you did to us? You left. You didn't come back. Do you know what that did to Mom? To me?" He looked down, shame etched into the lines of his face. "I was selfish," he admitted. "I thought I was running toward something better, but I only ran away from the people who mattered most." His honesty startled me, but it wasn't enough. Apologies didn't erase the years we lost. Days passed, and the house was filled with tension. Some moments felt almost normal, like when Mom and Dad laughed softly over coffee, but the sight only made my stomach twist. I couldn't stand the idea of him winning her over again, while I carried all the broken pieces he left behind. I took long walks in the park, hoping the fresh air would clear my thoughts, but I only returned with more anger, more confusion. One evening, the storm finally broke. We were in the living room when I confronted him, the words spilling out like years of bottled pain. "You don't get to just walk back in and pretend everything is fine," I cried. "You left me when I needed you the most. Do you know how many nights I wished you'd come back? And now you show up like nothing happened." My voice cracked, and tears streamed down my cheeks. Mom sat silently on the couch, tears in her eyes too, caught between us. Dad's face crumbled as he whispered, "I know I can't erase the past. I can only hope one day you'll let me prove that I've changed." His vulnerability hit me like a wave, but I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. That night, I cried into my pillow, feeling torn between the love I still carried deep down and the resentment that burned every time I looked at him. When Mom came into my room, she held me tightly, whispering, "It's okay to feel everything you're feeling. You don't have to forgive him today or ever. This is your choice." Over the weeks that followed, things shifted slowly. Dad didn't push. He helped with small things around the house. He cooked dinner. He asked about my day, without demanding answers. He showed up in ways he never had before, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. And while I didn't trust him fully, I began to see the cracks in my anger, glimpses of the little girl who still wanted her dad. The moment that changed everything came quietly. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found Mom and Dad laughing softly over an old story, and for the first time, it didn't make me angry. Instead, I felt a strange peace, a thought whispering that maybe healing wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to live with it. In time, I sat down with him again, this time not to shout but to listen. We talked for hours, about the years we lost, about the person I had become, about the man he hoped to be now. It didn't fix everything overnight, but it was a beginning. And for the first time, I realized beginnings are sometimes more powerful than endings. By summer, the house didn't feel so heavy anymore. We weren't perfect, and the past still lingered, but there was also laughter, shared meals, and hope. As I stood on the porch one morning, watching the sun rise over the quiet street, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Because maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone has done. Maybe it's about choosing not to let the pain define you anymore. And as I watched Mom smiling in the kitchen and Dad setting the table, I knew one thing for sure. Our story wasn't about what he had done. It was about what we were choosing to do now, together.